Hello and welcome back to the course on R programming. Slowly but surely we're making our way through this first section of the course. Previously we spoke about logical expressions and variables, and today that information will come in handy because we will be talking about the while loop. Now, the while loop isn't something that is very commonly used in a programming language like R, and that is because R has other means of achieving the same results through functions like sapply, lapply, and so on. However, it is imperative to understand how the while loop and other loops work in the background, because unless you know these fundamentals, there's no point in learning the more sophisticated tools. So that is why we will spend some time on understanding the while loop and further down the other types of loops. So let's jump straight into it. Here I've got a new worksheet, and we're going to right away see how the while loop is structured. The while loop starts with the keyword while, and you can see that it has been highlighted in orange or in a different color. That basically means that it's a keyword. Then it's followed by standard normal brackets, and then you have curly brackets that come afterwards. Notice that every time I open brackets, R automatically closes them for me, and that's so that we don't forget to close the brackets. Now, the first part over here is, of course, the first part is the word while. The second part is what goes inside the normal brackets, and it is the logical expression. You have to put a logical expression in here. So let's say our logical expression is ABC. And then in the curly braces, what you have to put is the body of the loop. So let's say the body of a loop is going to be XYZ, just for argument's sake. So what will happen here is once you run the loop, the studio or R will get to this part. It will check the logical expression, which is inside the brackets. So it'll check ABC, and if ABC is true, so if that logical expression returns true, then R will execute whatever is inside the body of the loop, in this case XYZ. Then it will go, and instead of continuing on, it will go back and check this expression again. It will check if ABC is true, and if it is still true, it will execute XYZ again. And that will continue on and on and on until ABC becomes false. As soon as ABC becomes false, the execution of the loop ceases, and that's the end of that loop. So let's give this loop some substance to see how it works. Let's say we want to print out a message. Let's say we want to print hello. And now here we're using a new function, which is print. Previously, I did mention that in R, you just have to type in the name of a variable or an expression for it and then execute it for it to appear in the console. That is true in all the cases except for when you're working inside a loop. To print something out from within a loop, you need to use the word print. So here we are printing the word hello, and inside this expression, let's for simplicity type in the word false. So we know that this expression is not true. It's just the word false, so therefore it's always false. It's never true. And if we run this loop, basically we shouldn't see anything appear in the console. Let's try that. Let's give that a go. Let's highlight this loop. We need to highlight all of it because it starts with the keyword and ends with that last bracket. And let's execute this now. As you can see, what happened here is this code was copied in. So this plus means that the line continues, that R is waiting for the end of this expression or the end of this loop before it executes it completely. And basically, so that means that the loop continues over several lines. And as you can see, nothing happened afterwards. Now let's change this word false to the word true. So now we know that this logical expression, which is simply the word true, is always true, and that means that this loop will keep going on forever. So this logical expression will never be false, and the loop will just become what is called an infinite loop, and it will make our computer just print this word out on and on and on, just basically forever. So let's go ahead and run that. Highlight it and hit run. So what we can see here is our infinite loop in action. Basically, the computer is constantly printing this word hello as fast as it possibly can, and we're getting lots and lots and lots of them here. Of course, that's not what we want. This was just for illustrational purposes. Now, in order to cancel an infinite loop, all you have to do is click escape on your keyboard, and that will force stop that loop. Okay. So now let's create a loop that has a bit more sense to it. Let's say we want to create a counter loop. Counter loop basically just counts some numbers and then prints them out. So we're going to start with a variable which we'll call counter. That'll be our key variable that will be triggering the execution, or that'll be governing the execution of the loop. So we'll understand what that means just in a second. And we'll assign it the value of 1. So we'll start at 1, and then we'll say while. In the normal brackets, we'll say while counter is less than 12. We want to count from 1 to 11, so that's why we're saying less than 12. Then we'll put in the normal brackets, and here we'll say print. We want to display the value of counter, and as you can see, if we leave it like this, then counter is not changing, so counter is equal to 1, and basically this loop will also be an infinite loop because this condition here will always be true. 1 is always less than 12. But what we can do is within the body of the loop, within these brackets, we can increase counter. So instead of counter, we can assign the value of counter plus 1. So basically we're taking counter, we're adding 1, and then we're reassigning that to counter at the end of the loop, and then we go back into the loop, and then the new value is checked, and this will continue until counter becomes 12. So let's go ahead and execute that. First we'll execute the first line, and then we'll highlight the loop and we'll execute the full loop. As you can see, the computer has counted up to 11 for us, just as we expected. So over here at the top, let me make some more space for this. At the top, you can see the copied code over here, and then you can see the printed values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And that is how loops work. Basically, it allows you to perform certain actions on and on and on, and saves you time. Instead of printing out 11 times the word print with the correct values, we did it in basically just 4 lines by using a loop. That is what loops are for. They're for iterating certain operations. And that brings us to the end of today's tutorial. Have a play around with that, see what other applications of the while loop you can come up with. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, happy coding. Hello and welcome back to the course on R programming. Today we're going to take a short break from learning new elements of R coding, and we'll take some time to learn how to use the console. So it's going to be a quick tutorial, but hopefully it's going to be a quite an insightful one. So this is our studio, and so far we've been used to utilizing this area to write our code and then execute it, whether it's line by line or several lines at a time. And then all of our variables would appear here, and some elements would be illustrated over here. So let's have a look at an example. Let's say I want to create a variable which is x, and I want to place the value 5 into that variable. If I execute this line, what you can see is this code has been copied into the console, it has been run, and a variable has appeared here with the value 5. Now if I want to print x, I just type in x, execute this line, and there you go. This code once again has been copied here, and the value has been printed out. So naturally, you're probably asking this question, why are all of the lines always copied from here to here? Well, the reason for that is that RStudio is an environment that has been created to make your work in R more pleasurable and also aesthetically more pleasing, and also so that you can save things and basically more efficient than just working in R itself. So as you remember, when we were installing R, we installed R and then we installed RStudio on top of that. So that means that you could hypothetically use R by itself, but RStudio, and actually many people do that. And there are other environments that allow you to use R. RStudio is just one of them. And what RStudio does is it creates this area over here where you can write your code, you can save your files, and then everything you write and execute, it actually copies into the console. And so what that means is that you can write code in the console by itself, avoiding this area over here. So let's have a look at that. Let's say I want to create a new variable which is y, and I want to put the value 4 into that variable. So I'll just type it right here in the console, and I'll execute this line. As you can see, the variable has appeared. We've got a variable y with a value of 4. This line is here, just like with the x variable. The only difference is that we don't have anything relating to y at all in this area over here. That's quite interesting. Now let's try print out the y variable. Let me print y, execute this line. There you go. We can see that y is equal to 4. So basically, you could type up all of your code here and avoid this part, and you'd get the same result. The only thing is that it wouldn't be reproducible, so you wouldn't be able to save your code like we do here. So if we want to save our file, we just click here and we can save our file, and then we can load it later and we'll have that same code saved. If you type it up in a console, then it isn't that convenient. But at the same time, what this illustrates is it illustrates how RStudio works and what exactly is happening. So it took us quite a few tutorials to get here, I know, but and some courses out there will throw you right away into the deep end. They'll explain all this about the console, but I think this is a great approach that we now know how to use RStudio in general, and now we know this additional thing about the console. So basically, you can think of RStudio as a shell on top of R, and all it does is it takes all of this code that you create here and it copies it into the console, and then it runs it for you as you specify the lines that should be run. So there we go. That's how you use the console. So just be aware of that. You can type any code here, and this brings us to the end of today's tutorial. I look forward to seeing you next time, and until then, happy coding. Hello and welcome back to the course on R programming. In today's tutorial, we will be exploring the for loop. Now, the for loop is somewhat similar to the while loop, but in my opinion, it can be more convenient at times. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy the code from our tutorial on the while loop, and we'll paste it into a new file over here. And this is where we're going to be talking about the for loop, and having this while loop code will allow us to compare the two side by side. Alright, so let's create a for loop. The for loop starts with the keyword for, and then just like the while loop, it has simple braces and then curly braces. Now the curly braces are indeed for the body of the loop, but the simple braces, they don't specify a logical expression. Instead, they specify the iterations of the loop. So in this case, let's say we want to print out the word hello. So here I'll add print hello. Let's say hello R for a bit of fun. So we want to print out the phrase hello R, and in the simple braces, we want to specify the iterations. What are we going to iterate over? So we're going to have a variable I, which will be iterated over 5 values. So will print out the phrase 5 times. So we need I to run across 5 values. And to specify that, we need to type in I in 1 to 5. So this is an interesting construct which we will discuss just now, but for now let's just run this code. So for I in 1 to 5, print this phrase hello R. Let's select all of that and hit Control Enter or Command Return. So there we go. The phrase has been printed out 4 times. So what exactly happened here? I know it might be a bit confusing at the start, and also if you have experience with other programming languages, then the for loop in R is a bit different. So you don't have those semicolons, you don't have those 3 elements inside the for loop. It is a bit different, and why is that? Well, this is where we are starting to touch for the first time ever the concept of vectors. Now, don't get afraid, don't get worried. We won't be digging too much into vectors in this specific tutorial, but this is our first encounter of a vector, and it's natural because R is all about vectors and vectorized operations, and we'll drill into vectors in a lot of detail in the next section of the course. But for now, let me show you a quick intro or show you how we're using a vector here. So what this construct actually is it is a vector. So if I select this 1 to 5 just by itself, and now I run this code, so I press Command Return, what you'll see is this line of code has been copied into the console, and then these values appear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So basically, this expression 1:5 represents a vector of numbers, or just basically, if you're used to other programming languages, then it's kind of like an array of numbers. If you're not used to programming languages, then it's just a sequence of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And This in R is called a vector. Once again, we'll talk about vectors further down the course. But basically what we're saying in this construct, and this is what we're interested in now, is we're saying that I has to iterate within this construct, which is the vector 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I has to iterate through all of these values, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I could create a similar for loop, and I could say for I in, let's say, from 5 to 10, right? And then I run this. What you'll see is hello R has been printed 6 times. Why is that? Because if I select 5 to 10 now and press command return, you'll see that there are 6 values here, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I has been iterated. So it doesn't really matter where you start or what this vector actually is. It could be characters, it could be any types of numbers. Basically, I is iterating through them, and every time I changes, this cycle or this loop is executed, and whatever's inside the body of the loop is executed. And that's how for loops work in R. And as you can see, the for loop is actually quite short compared to the while loop. So it saves a bit of space, and because it does use vectors in that way, it can be a bit more convenient to use than the while loop. But once again, we'll talk more about vectors further down in the course. Just get your head around this on how the for loop works, and try some experimenting. Try putting in different values in the colons on the left, on the right, see what happens and see how that affects your for loop, and maybe try using the I inside the body. So just like we did with counter over here, we used counter inside the body of the while loop. Try using I inside the body of the while loop and see what happens, because ultimately learning a programming language is about trying and practicing. Okay, so this brings us to the end of today's tutorial, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, happy coding.